Done.
Okay, so welcome everyone, and thank you very much for joining us at a bit of an unusual time for us, but a much more convenient time for our guest who's joining us from India. Thank you, Shivya. And anyone who's not able to join us this morning will be able to see the video, which we will send out tomorrow. I'm really excited to introduce you to Shivya. Shivya and I have been meeting up at various places in the world for a number of years at different conferences, and I'm sorry about that clanging in the background. So let me just tell you a little bit about Shivya. Shivya is the founder of, you may be familiar with her blog. She's the founder of The Shooting Star. She's also a best-selling author she's written a book of the same name, and she's a leading advocate of solo, offbeat, vegan, and responsible travel. And in 2013, she gave up her apartment, sold most of her stuff, stored some things in the boot of a friend's car, and hit the road for an indefinite period of time. She's appeared on the cover of National Geographic Traveler in India and been featured by the Washington Post among travel influencers who are changing the way that we think about the world. Her works appeared on BBC Travel, Condé Nast Traveler, and many leading national and international publications. During the pandemic, she co-founded Voices of Rural India. And if you're on our email list, you may have seen this in our newsletter where we featured it. It's a passion project of hers, and it aims to build digital storytelling skills and alternate livelihoods among rural communities across India. It's a beautiful and fascinating site, and I would absolutely recommend that you check it out. So welcome, Shivya. Thank you for being with us today.
Thanks so much, Tracy, and it's so great to see you despite the physical distance between us.
And maybe, so everyone else has been typing into the chat where they are in the world. Can you situate yourself for us within India and let us know where you are?
Sure. So I spent the last 9 months as a pandemic refugee in Goa, which some of you might be familiar. It's a tropical part of the country. So I was close to the beach and the palms and the paddies. But I just got to the mountains, to my home state actually, which is Uttarakhand. And I plan to spend the next 3 to 6 months in the mountains, and hopefully I'll be vaccinated by then.
Oh, that's great. So today, our topic today is sustainable travel. It was one of the most important things that people told us they were interested in when we did a survey of our members last year. And it was also the top of the list of topics when we broached them to our insiders group. So we're really happy to have you here today. And it's sustainable travel is it's a phrase we hear a lot. I don't know if we all understand it or understand it the same way, but can you maybe describe that to us and what it means to travel sustainably?
Yeah, I think especially now during the past year, a lot of the conversations have moved to talking about sustainability and sustainable living. And I think the idea of it sounds a bit complicated, but to put it really simply, traveling sustainably just means thinking about each and every choice that we make, right from the moment we're booking our trip to the time we're back home and setting out for the next trip. So right from which company we travel with, and if we're going solo, then independently, then what kind of destinations are we choosing? Are we going in off season or the prime season? Are we contributing to over tourism? How are we choosing to get there? Where do we stay? Where do we eat? What do we do while we're there? How long do we spend in a place? And it sounds like a lot as I'm saying this, but the moment we start thinking consciously about these choices, they just kind of become part of the entire planning process. And I think just being mindful, choosing something mindfully rather than just basing it on our budget. I mean, budget is absolutely important, but there are all these other factors that can go into our planning process. And that's all it means to travel sustainably.
It really encompasses a lot of different elements of travel, doesn't it?
It does, absolutely.
And why is it particularly important for us to travel more sustainably now?
Yeah, I mean, look at the world around us right now, right? We're in the middle of a pandemic, which, amongst many other reasons, is caused by biodiversity loss, by deforestation, by intensive animal agriculture, and so forth. We're also in the middle of a climate crisis, which means we need to try harder than ever to protect, the environment around us. And I think just the fact that we travel to experience the incredible beauty of this planet, and so it's our responsibility to also protect and conserve it.
Okay. And so many of us believe in the concept and we know that we should be doing something and we want to be doing something. Can you give us some ideas of let's say, some of the easier things that we can do to get started, some concrete examples of things that we can do as we work to become more sustainable in our travels?
Yeah. So there are lots of things. I think we could start with something as simple as, how do we choose a destination? Are we choosing to go to a place just because it's super popular among our friends and maybe on Instagram? Or are we choosing to go to that place because we have something personal that we hope to gain out of it? So, for example, everyone's thinking about going to Venice, but I think it's really important to ask ourselves why. Like, why are we drawn to that destination? And I think if we can just expand our definition of what we think of travel, like, is it just about sightseeing and some photos, or are we hoping to, experience a deeper change within us? And I think the moment we start thinking of that, the way we choose our destination, what we do there, where we stay, it becomes a lot more about experiencing a place rather than just being a tourist on a, with an itinerary and a plan to, like a checklist. And I think all of us can make that conscious decision the next time we decide, where we're going to travel. So I think that's the easiest thing we can begin with.
Okay. I think, do we still have you there? So this is the challenge of international Zoom calls. I think we have lost Shivya, but hopefully she will be back shortly. She had told us that there could be some issues with her connectivity because she's just moved to a new location. Last week when I spoke with her, she was somewhere else. So hopefully she will be back with us momentarily.
She's just trying to join now.
Okay.
And yeah, I've actually got her joining twice at the moment, so we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens.
Sorry about that. I don't know why I dropped off the call.
No problem.
Okay, your
So
camera needs to be turned, I think.
Yeah, we're seeing you sideways right now.
Oh. Okay.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like I never.
So you covered some of the first things that we could start with in our goal of becoming more sustainable. What would be some of the more difficult things that require a little bit more work and effort on our part?
Yeah, so actually I just want to add a couple of things to the easier things.
Oh, of course, please.
We're not too intimidated. So I think one of the easiest things we can do is carry our own water bottle. We travel, I have mine here. When we travel, we're spending a week in a place, and that means we're going through like 50, 60 plastic bottles in a single trip. And it doesn't sound like much when it's just one person, but when we multiply that with like a billion travelers, that's a lot of plastic in our oceans and our landfills. And all it means is carrying, a bottle that we can refill at hotels, restaurants. We can carry a live straw filter, or we can carry a live straw bottle with an inbuilt filter. And I think that's absolutely something that we can also do in our daily lives, no matter where we live. So that's definitely one of the easiest things we can do. And then the other is, while we're in a destination, we can choose to use more eco-friendly transport, just as we would do at home. So whether that's public transport, it's walking, cycling, it's also a great way to really experience the life, like the local life in a place, rather than using a taxi to get from one place to another. Just kind of slowing down and choosing a more eco-friendly way to get around and do our sightseeing. So
Okay.
those are the easy things.
It's when you were talking about the plastic bottles, I think we've probably all seen those images of plastic bottles washing up on beaches in very popular destinations. And it's astounding the amount of
Yeah.
waste.
Yeah. And I think the time it really hit me was I was on an island off Cuba, and it was like a really small kind of forgotten island. And there was just one small shop on the island, and they sold very basic things. So there was hardly any plastic in that shop. But when I went snorkeling above the coral reefs, I saw like plastic things, which were, like plastic bags, cigarette boxes, shampoo bottles, beer cans, and they were not even sold in the shop there. So they were just washing up from like other parts of the ocean onto the reefs of this island. And so I think our actions in one part of the world could impact, what happens in another part of the world.
Right. Wow. I hadn't actually thought about that. I was thinking about, because you've seen those images in, let's say, Thailand, or place where there are all of these big sort of parties on the beach, and all of this trash is accumulated. But we kind of forget that it also travels.
Yeah. Yeah. The ocean doesn't know its borders.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good. Those are some things that are, I mean, they're really easy to do.
Mm-hmm.
I
So
have a question.
Yeah.
A question. I personally have a question
Yeah.
about the carrying your own water bottle. Uh, do you have a recommended um, filtration bottle to ensure that we're
Yeah.
drinking water that is safe?
Live straw all the way.
Life straw all the way. Okay.
Yeah. So a lot of my friends swear by the live straw bottle, which has an inbuilt filter. So no matter what water you're drinking, you're still filtering it again. But personally, I carry like a detachable filter, and I only use it when I don't have access to like filtered water. So yeah, they're both options.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Okay.
Thank you. I think that's very valuable for people who have a little anxiety about drinking water, whether it's in Europe or anywhere else, right?
Mm-hmm.
It can
Yeah.
be a concern. So that's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
So maybe now we can slide into the more difficult, some of the bigger things that might require more effort to help us be more sustainable.
Yeah. So I think like flying is something that's on everyone's mind, and I think it can be, depending on where you come from, how long a time span you have, what kind of passports you have. It can be pretty hard to cut down on flying. Like taking long distance flights. But if we can, that's a huge way to reduce our carbon footprint, our carbon emissions because of leisure travel. Personally, for me, I have an Indian passport, which means I need to apply for a lot of visas when I'm traveling overland. But I'm trying not to let that stop me. So in 2019, I think, or 2018, I did a land journey from Thailand via Myanmar to the northeast of India. And the reason I did that was because I was asked to speak at a responsible tourism conference in India, and I felt like a bit of I felt it really ironic that I was going to fly there just to speak at that conference. So I decided to do a land journey, and I ended up seeing parts of Myanmar which probably would never have been on my itinerary if I was just visiting the country, otherwise. So it turned out to be an absolutely incredible land journey. But of course, you need a lot more time, resources, and just I guess, the conviction to take public transport in different countries. So it can
So
be
that
harder.
So that's an example of how, making that effort also yields rewards to the traveler, because you
Exactly.
saw things you wouldn't have seen otherwise.
Yeah, and I met people along the way because I did pretty long bus journeys from time to time, and I ended up befriending people on the buses, like local people who I probably wouldn't have met otherwise. So it was a really different experience, and I felt like I saw so much more of Myanmar than I otherwise would have.
Right. And just on the topic of flights, um, carbon offsets, is that a helpful thing? I mean, that seems like an easy thing to do. Do you
Mhm.
consider it also a helpful thing?
So I think it's pretty controversial, carbon offsets, because I mean, what scientists say is that once you've emitted the carbon, there's no taking it back. So you can do something to make sure that maybe in the future, like there is some sort of carbon that's stored, like maybe by reforestation. But once you've emitted the carbon, you have emitted it, right? So I mean, it is pretty controversial, and also a lot of the carbon offset projects are like unless you can personally verify them. I mean, it's a bit hard to say whether you're really offsetting your carbon or not. But I think it's still like I mean, the fact is that it's almost impossible right now to not fly. Like if you want to travel, unless you're always choosing destinations closer home. And if you are choosing to fly, then I think like maybe not thinking of it as an offset and like like not having the guilt of flying, but maybe just thinking of it as a way to contribute to an environmentally friendly project. I think it's a great idea, like to always do that irrespective of whether you're flying or not. So if you identify a project that you can personally verify, it's great that you can contribute to it.
Yeah. Janice did
Yeah.
some research last year on this topic and found there was a lot of variability between these different organizations that were claiming to, help you save the environment, offload some guilt from the flying.
Yeah. Yeah, it's more of a guilt offset than a carbon offset.
Yeah. But I
Yeah.
guess if we're doing it hand in hand, reducing our flights and offsetting
Mhm.
the carbon, if we can find a responsible way to do that, that's also good.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think the other thing we can also do is like oftentimes when we travel, we try to pack in a lot of things into our trip. So maybe we're flying from point A to B to C to D to E and then coming back home. But instead, we could take only like one flight and spend a lot more time in one single place. And I think there is a lot of FOMO, like fear of missing out. That if we, like let's say if we're going to Europe and we don't see all of it, or like at least 5 countries in one trip, then we're missing out. But I think we just have to like retune our minds to think that we're actually experiencing a place much deeper, and it's okay to miss out on the other places. So it's a joy of missing out. So
Right.
just changing the way we think. Yeah.
That's good. And
So
are
FOMO
there,
turns to JOMO.
yeah, I like that. And are there other examples of some of these more difficult things that we should or could be doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the other thing we can do is to try and find eco-friendly accommodations to stay at. It's obviously very easy and comfortable to stay at a big chain hotel where we know we'll get a standardized experience. But instead, we could look for something that's, maybe it's built in the local style, it's run by a local family, it's environmentally conscious. So maybe they don't use single-use plastic, they segregate their waste, they use renewable energy rather than fossil fuels, and so on. So just choosing, being more mindful of the accommodations we choose. And it doesn't have to be a fancy eco lodge if that's not something we afford, or if that's not the kind of place we're looking for. It can also be a small Airbnb or a small guest house or a B&B. So there are lots of options if we start to, I mean, a simple Google search for a specific region could reveal, a lot of options. Yeah.
It's interesting. I stayed at an eco resort once in Nova Scotia, and
Mhm.
it was amazing how, they grew their own vegetables and herbs and things. They had a forager who went out into the forest and foraged for different things to use in their food. the water that came through the faucets in the room and also through the shower was local spring water. I mean, it was really, they were so self-contained, like, or self, they were making everything, or, using things in the land. And it was an incredible thing to see, and so different from, staying in a high rise hotel sort of setting, which also has its, has its perks when you travel. But to see how that could be done was really very interesting.
Yeah, that's amazing. I did a short trip like a couple of months back to Kerala, which is the southernmost part of India, and I stayed in this like eco resort, and it was amazing. Like I was working on my laptop or something, and then just outside my balcony, I saw the chef walk past me, and then he climbed up a tree to get some leaves or herbs or something, and it was amazing. Like it's truly farm to table. They're just growing like a lot of the things that they need, and just climbing up trees, and they have like cacao trees and all kinds of things. So yeah, he's just getting that, and that's the meal that we're served. So it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. It at this
Yeah.
place that I was at, actually offered as an option that you could go for a walk in the woods with their forager, and he was pointing out things I had no idea were edible. I mean, and things that I wouldn't even have noticed on the forest floor, right? And yeah, so it was pretty incredible that that they could be that self-sufficient.
Yeah, and it's actually more viable for like hotels and resorts to do that, right? Because you save so much like in costs. So why don't more of them do that, and why don't we like demand more of that as travelers?
Hmm. So we've covered transportation and accommodation. Are there any other things that you wanted to mention that we could be trying to do?
Yeah, so I think the next thing we would do, we've gotten there, we've found a place to stay. The next thing would be what is it that we actually do in the place, and I think that's where a lot of things come in. We could be, for example, if we are going to buy souvenirs, we could be looking at local artisans, farmers markets, local markets, where the money that we spend goes back into the community. um, so that's shopping. Then in terms of the attractions we go to, um, I hope nobody is going to zoos anymore, but there are plenty of animal attractions around the world where wild animals are just kept caged for our entertainment. And I think we are, every time we pay money to enter an establishment like that, we are supporting that animal cruelty. And so it's upon us to stop doing that. um, Also in terms of when we go to, especially when we go to developing countries, people who are, mm, I don't know a better word for it, but like exotic to us, the tendency is often to just raise our camera and take their picture without really trying to have a conversation with them or asking for their permission. And we wouldn't want anyone to walk into our houses or our neighborhood and do that to us. So and I have to say I've been guilty of that as well. But I remember I was traveling in the Himalayan region many years ago, and uh, I think I was waiting for like a bus or something, and I happened to talk to this very old lady with like a beautifully wrinkled face, and I tried to have a conversation with her, but she seemed very cold to me, and that's not really common like in the mountain villages. So I tried to like probe a bit and figure out why that was. And then finally she said, if you want to take my picture, just take it and go. And I didn't even have a camera on me at that time. And, I asked her why she said that. And she said that's what people do. Like they show up at her house or, in her village or to her neighbor's house. And they just take like, people just take pictures of you and they walk away. And maybe they sell those pictures and they earn money, or I don't know what they do with those pictures. But it would be nice if, like they respected us and try to learn who we are, or understand what our lives are like. And I think oftentimes we're just in so much of a hurry that we just want the pictures, but we don't really want maybe a connection. And I guess we just need to double think that again. Yeah.
I think there's been a lot more awareness of that in the last few years, and there, especially
Mhm.
because of that story, but that very, very famous National Geographic photo.
Yeah.
And um, you know, the fact that that woman got nothing from that, and that image is on everything, mugs and
Yeah.
t-shirts, you know, lots of people made lots of money from that photo, but not the subject of the photo.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else you want to add to that?
So I think so we've gone from transport to stay to what we do there, and then I guess like while we're there or when we come back home, we do tend to share our pictures and our stories on social media, and that's where things can get very tricky as well, especially now in this age of Instagram and over tourism, at least pre-pandemic. But I think it's whether you have like 100 followers or 100,000 followers, I think everything that we post out there has an impact on someone. Maybe that's our friends and family, or maybe that's a complete stranger. And so, are we creating a positive impact or are we creating a negative impact? And I think we need to take onus of what we're posting. So, do we really need to geotag a place that's completely pristine? Do we really need to post the same kind of pictures that everyone else is posting? So I think just being mindful of what we post on social media and how we present a destination on social media can make a big difference. And I mean, especially today, like with Instagram just exploding, and I'm sure Tracy, you and Janice have, um, you know, like with Instagram, you really know like what's happening with that.
It's interesting, when we talked last week, you mentioned just sort of in passing that you wanted to talk about the impact of Instagram, and so it's interesting to hear about that. I think maybe it was New Zealand. Maybe New Zealand tourism did
Mhm.
this promo.
Yeah,
Have you seen
yeah,
that? Yeah, they had sort of park rangers chasing after Instagrammers.
that was a good one.
But yeah, it's true. There's this desire to go and have a picture taken in the same place that millions of other people have taken that same photo. And also when you're talking about tagging very remote or pristine places, that's going to be an interesting thing going forward, I would imagine, because there will be post-pandemic, people wanting to go to less populated places, or
Mhm.
to less well-known places. And what will the impact be if they behave, if we behave in the same way that we have, will we be destroying more destinations in that way?
Yeah, I think it's going to be really important. I guess during the pandemic, we've all been talking about how this is going to change us completely and so on. But I think there's going to be like a lot of revenge spending and revenge travel, and just kind of all this time that we've lost just trying to make up for it. But I think that's where it's really really important to also be mindful of our choices. Um, and yeah, of what we post on social media and how social media also influences us, because sometimes we're just we're scrolling through our Instagram feed and feeling all this FOMO about the places that we're not going to. And but I mean, the reality is often so different than what we see in those beautiful pictures.
Yes. Okay. Now here's another question for you. Is it necessarily more expensive to travel sustainably?
Well, I guess no. Like, I think if it doesn't matter whether you're a budget traveler, a luxury traveler, or somewhere in between. You can just realign your budget and your choices to be more sustainable. So, for example, I mean, let's just take the example of flights, right? Like, if we're just taking one flight and spending more time in one place, I think we're going to end up spending less because we can stay in a place for a longer time. We can use public transport to get around because we're not in such a big hurry, and we can explore a lot more of the same area, which will work out less expensive, as opposed to going to multiple places and staying in multiple accommodations and so forth. It's the same with using public transport. It's going to be much cheaper, or walking or cycling. than taking taxis, especially if you're in a country like Switzerland or something. Also, in terms of just the accommodations that we choose to stay at, I think by now there are accommodations across all budgets, right from sustainable hostels to fancy eco lodges. I think there's everything in that spectrum. We just have to do a bit of research to find the right places, which is not always easy, but there is, like Google has the answers to everything these days.
Okay. Um, so our group are all solo travelers. And that doesn't always mean traveling independently. So sometimes we travel independently, sometimes we take a tour or we join up with a tour for part of a trip. Are there things that we can do? I guess what we've been talking about so far is mostly about what we can do when we're traveling independently. Are there things that we can do when we're traveling with a tour company? And maybe that starts from the research we do before we choose the tour, but so that and also things that we can do on a tour.
Yeah, so I think just finding the right tour company is extremely important. So, for example, I mean, the easy answer is, I guess, Intrepid Travel, which they're uh, I haven't really looked at the calculations, but they do claim to be carbon neutral, it's probably one of the few tour companies who make that claim. But also the fact that they have, a lot of public transport built into their trips, they have local guides and so forth. But I think even if we choose a different, maybe a smaller tour company, we can ask questions like whether they use local guides, and does some of the money we spend go back to the local community in some way. The kind of the kind of itinerary they have and the kind of attractions they choose to take people to, is it just the regular beaten path, or do they actually let you experience what life there is like and what the community is like. And I think just by probing a little bit and asking a few more questions, we can get a good idea of whether they're actually, the money that we're going to spend is actually going to go back to, part of it is going to go back to the local people, and whether they are eco-friendly. I think something as simple as, are they going to carry like crates of single-use plastic bottles? Oops, did you lose me? Okay.
Just for a second.
Okay, great. Yeah, so just asking a few questions, or maybe even looking at their website or Instagram, I think it can give us a good idea of whether they are a responsible company, or are they just in it for the money. And I think when we also choose companies which are responsible, we tend to have more immersive experiences, because if we can spend time with local guides, the local community, if we can eat at local places, and even the kind of destinations that are chosen and built into the itinerary, it can completely change the way we experience a place, as opposed to just doing the regular stuff that everyone else is offering.
The I went on a river cruise a couple years ago, and I was really impressed that there were often when you go to your room, there are these tiny little plastic bottles of shampoo and conditioner and whatever. They actually gave a large bottle, like enough to last you the 12 days or whatever it was that I was on this thing. And there were no plastic bottles anywhere. They gave everyone a travel bottle when they got on. And I think you could, if you lost it, you could get another one still. And they had water everywhere. So you could fill your bottles before you got on a tour. You could fill them to go to your room. There were no plastic glasses in the room. It was really, I mean, it was interesting to see how they've begun to adapt to these sort of things to be more responsible in that way.
Yeah, that's incredible, and I think it's something that we should also demand as travelers, because a lot of businesses, if they feel like they're losing out, on a traveler because they're not doing this, then they'd be a lot more inclined to do that. So I think there is power in our wallet and in the money that we choose to spend. And I have to tell you about this. There's an organization called Spiti Ecosphere, which works in very remote villages in the mountains in India. and they have some amazing trips, which are they're almost like regular trips, like 1 week or 2 weeks. But during that time, you spend at least a couple of days taking part in a project that they're working on. So you could be involved in building a solar powered greenhouse for a greenhouse or a solar powered like a bathroom, or something that actually benefits the local community. So these are really remote villages, and it gets really cold in the winter, like minus 30 degrees. And as a traveler, you can not just experience that harsh life, but also in a way contribute back to it. And I think that's what traveling is really about, right? Like building that connect with people, and giving back in some way, like having a positive impact rather than a negative one. And yeah, finding the right tour company is the way to go.
Well, on that subject, one of the things I was going to ask you is about positive initiatives that you've been seeing that are being created around the world. That's a good example. Are there others that occur to you that you've seen that are really heading in the right way?
Yeah, there are lots. So there's an organization called Veg Voyages, which who I've been in touch with recently, and they're doing some amazing work, because we're hearing so much now about the environmental footprint of eating meat, for example. So this company is entirely vegan and vegetarian, and they've been working with communities around the world to help them, like better their nutrition, but using just what grows locally and seasonally, and vegan and vegetarian cooking. And as travelers, there's a lot of emphasis on wildlife conservation, so you end up spending time with at like animal rescue sanctuaries and so on. So it's very dedicated towards people who are they're animal lovers, they're wildlife lovers, and giving back to the local community at the same time. So that I thought was pretty amazing and pretty unique. Um, there's also an organization called Global Himalayan Expedition, which has been working in remote parts of the Himalayas, both in India and Nepal. And their entire trip is based on electrifying villages that have never had electricity. So it's actually a bunch of engineers who started the company, and they create solar microgrids, which are installed by travelers. So it's an entire expedition. Everyone pitches in to carry solar panels and things like that. And when you go to a village, you spend enough time there to solar electrify the entire village. And you're actually doing that during your trip, and you can see the impact on people. So
That's
I'm sure it's
amazing.
incredibly, I'm sure it must be incredibly fulfilling as well, like as a traveler.
Yeah. Wow. Oh, I love that. Now that's something, that's a story to tell when you come home from your trip.
Yeah, and that's a trip worth making, like worth flying for, and yeah.
Yeah. So I think this might be something you mentioned when we talked last week. And I was hoping you could tell us some more about what greenwashing is and how we can identify and avoid that.
Yeah. So I guess we're going to see more and more of greenwashing in the coming years. It's simply the idea that someone claims to be green or eco-friendly or sustainable, but actually they do, like the bare minimum towards it. So I think the biggest example is going to any, big hotel and seeing those, those cards on your bed saying that we really care about the environment, so we don't want to wash your sheets and towels every day. Um, and I guess like that's something, but there's so much more that they can do. So I think greenwashing is just being aware that someone might claim to be green or eco-friendly, but you have to probe deeper to know if they really are. Like, are they still using single-use plastic bottles? Are their toiletries still in single-use plastic? Are they still powered by fossil fuels? Do they harvest their own rainwater? Do they grow their own vegetables? The very basic things that, I think in this day and age, we can expect more accommodations to do.
So putting a note about their commitment to the environment and not, not wanting to wash your towels right next to two plastic bottles of water. It's not really.
It's ironic.
That might tip you off. So this is maybe a bigger, broader question. But I'm wondering if you think that this global pandemic has created an opportunity for change, and if you feel hopeful about the future of responsible tourism. Certainly, it seems there are a lot of people talking about wanting to travel differently when we return to travel. Um, and yeah, so I'm just wondering if you think this is a time when that might actually really happen.
Yeah, I think there's a huge opportunity because just before the pandemic happened, all our conversations were about over tourism. And now that problem is gone, at least for the time being. So I think it's a huge opportunity to completely recreate both tourism destinations, but also how we think about travel. And I personally do feel hopeful because in the last 1 year, I think there've been the whole conversation about responsible tourism, which was initially so niche, has really gone into, it's happening everywhere. And I think most tourism conferences around the world now have a section dedicated to responsible tourism. And I hope that will just grow bigger and bigger. Also, a lot of, like awards, for example, have responsible tourism awards now as well. And a lot of the accommodations, I did, I think, I don't know about other parts of the world, but at least in India, there's been such a clear demarcation between responsible businesses and, uh, I don't know, regular businesses, just by seeing how they've managed to retain or lay off their staff. Um, and whether they've really taken this time to make serious changes in the way they work, in the way they've been responsible or not. So I think in a way it's been a good time to weed out businesses who are just in it for the money, whereas others that actually care about the people and the environment that they work with. So I do feel hopeful for the future, and just the fact that so many travelers are also thinking about being more responsible about our choices and being more responsible towards the planet.
And we've really given the planet a break for the last year. So a break from us. So it
The real
um,
virus.
yeah. So hopefully we will continue to be kind to the to the planet.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and I think we've all realized, like in our personal lives, like how important like connecting with nature is and protecting it as well. So I hope we can carry that mindset into our travels too.
yes, there's been a lot of I think a lot more people doing outdoor kind of travel or
Mhm.
activities than ever before.
Yeah.
And that's really interesting. It may create its own problem, I suppose, in some
Mm.
destinations, or that those destinations will have to manage, um, manage the number of people or in some way. But certainly, in our Facebook group, the Solo Travel Society, there seems to be a lot of talk in there about people wanting to travel more slowly, to go to one destination and, fly to one destination and then go off and do, go off in different directions from there, but stay for a longer period of time.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it's been an interesting opportunity, I think, as well, not being able to travel for a year, to really think about travel and how we do it and how we want to do it, going forward.
Yeah.
Um, do we have any questions, Janice, from anyone?
Not so far. There was some sharing. I shared the Hacienda Tres Rios in the Riviera Maya in Mexico as a resort. If you want to go to a resort where you just get to lie on the beach and the like, Hacienda Tres Rios is a very good option. They won a Green Globe Award. Their water, most of the water used at the resort is actually desalinated from the sea, and then of course goes back into the sea. They've also connected with the local indigenous communities as well. So it's very interesting resort. Then Zenaida brought up Rancho La Puerta, um, as a resort as well, has been operating on an ecologically sustainable principle since 1940. Now I don't know
Oh,
where
wow.
that's located. Maybe Zenaida, you can tell us.
Yeah, Janice, that's you fly into San Diego, you get picked up there, and it's just on the other side of the Mexican border.
Okay.
And it was established in 1940 by a Hungarian couple. And they came, you know, with all of these wonderful ideas of literally growing your own vegetables and fruits. And they went out at the time, it was completely the desert out there. There was nothing there. And so they came with their Hungarian ideas, which, as you know, is also, I mean, the Hungarians have a very long tradition of beauty. Elizabeth Arden and Helena Rubinstein and Zaza Gabor and all of these people, they all come from, and Ernest Laszlo, they all come from that caring philosophy, caring for your body. And so they established that, and they started very, very simply. Now it's a luxury resort. I was there in 1990, I think. And I just looked it up. They still, I mean, they've just redone their website. It's a fabulous place.
Wow.
And the ratio of people caring for you or caring for the place to the ratio of guests is about 1-to-1. But it's very much, you know, you still have the garden, the vegetable garden, everything is sourced locally, basically on their own land. And it's wonderful.
Yeah.
I would go there tomorrow.
So there are places like that. And I was also going to say that I've been on a couple of trips over the years with Overseas Adventure Travel and with the Grand Circle. And on each, so I've been on 3 trips with them. And each trip we ended up ended up going to a person's home. They actually pay the person to bring you into their home and cook with you and enjoy a meal with them. So so there are, you know, very unique experiences that tour companies that can offer that really are supportive of sustainable approach to travel.
It's interesting. I remember hearing about something that Adventure Canada does, where they have people, I can't remember where this was. I want to say it was in the Yukon, but they have an option for people to go into a community and meet with people. But they have a social worker that they have hired to ensure that they're doing this in a respectful way, so that it's not just a ship pulling in and a whole whack of people showing up at somebody's door. They've really thought it through.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I was on a ship with them 2 years ago, and we pulled into, oh goodness, I can't remember the name of the port, but it's one of the larger communities in the north, which means there may be a few hundred people, but not many. And they had arranged a hockey game between the locals and the people that were on the ship, and like, yeah, Adventure Canada does a very, very good job about being respectful of the local communities and the environment there, as best as a ship can be, as I should say.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm thinking of I think after sorry, I forgot her name, but I was just thinking of Bali. There's a place called Bali Eco Stay, and it's like an eco lodge. But the amazing thing is that they have a private waterfall, which is absolutely gorgeous, and they generate their entire electricity through hydropower through the waterfall. So you're staying in a private eco lodge with your private waterfall, and your electricity is all, you know, from the water. So it's so incredible.
Oh, that's great. We're almost at the end. So I wonder if there are any projects that you're working on. I mean, I'm fascinated by your Voices of Rural India project. But if you want to talk a bit about that or any other projects that you are working on.
So there are a couple of things. So Voices of Rural India is definitely one, where just to tell you a little bit about how it began. I think the conversation began back in May last year, and in India we have a lot of responsible tourism businesses which are pretty small in scale, but they work with specific communities in different parts of the country. And suddenly, with the tourism shutdown, a lot of the communities that rely on tourism, their incomes just went to zero. And some of them have agricultural land, so they went back to agriculture, but there are others who don't. I was just brainstorming ideas with a friend of mine who works with such a community. And then we thought, like traveling is all about stories, right? Like we travel to places and we try to find stories from the people and the place. And typically it's people like us who have access to digital, who kind of tell these stories online. But what if we could train people to tell their own stories in their own voices? And that's how Voices of Rural India was born. So we've been working with about 8 or 9 communities now, where it's mostly been women and younger people, but also, for example, an 82-year-old couple who they've been telling their stories in different ways. So either it's video, audio, photography, or written. And then we translate in English as well so that it's accessible to a wider audience. Um, so people have been writing about how their traditional foods have changed, how the wildlife and the forests have changed, but also about like their local festivals, traditions, and so forth. And a lot of the stories are they're really different because as outsiders we can't really grasp into their culture so deeply. But this is them telling their own stories, and I think it's being done for the first time in India. So that's pretty cool. And for every story that's approved for publishing, we pay them a fee. So it's almost like digital journalism, but of course with a completely different, audience. Um, and yeah, we hope that they can use some of these skills to also support their own tourism businesses in the future, or like their homestays or their work as guides, to continue telling these stories in the online space. So that's Voices of Rural India. You can check out the website, which is voicesofruralindia.org. Um, and the other project that it's more of it's been a while now since it began, but it's a clothing collection. So I've partnered with like a sustainable fashion brand, like a very small outfit in India, where we have travel inspired T-shirts and sweatshirts and so on. And the proceeds are used to support a reforestation project in my home state, which is Uttarakhand. So you're buying something which is, it's fair trade, it's organic, it comes in recycled pizza boxes as packaging. Um, and so you're kind of wearing who you are. So there's a T-shirt that says "Just a Girl Who Travels," for example, and you're contributing towards a reforestation effort in the mountains. So that's my other project at the moment.
Oh, that's great. Well, we'll put links to both those things in the when we send out the email with the recording of this session. We'll put links to those, and Shivya is also going to send us a couple of links to other resources or articles that you might want to read that will be interesting on related to the topics we've been touching on today. Unless we have any last questions, I think we're at the end of our time.
No, we don't have more questions. Rose also suggested that the Sierra Club has great environmental project tours throughout the US and Canada, and some in Canada. So I'm going to include these recommendations that came in the chat with the show notes, along with the recommendations that Shivya has. So yeah, we'll do that too.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you, Shivya, so much for joining us today. I think that's been quite inspiring, and I think that we're probably all going to we'll have a better grasp now of some of the things that we can do to travel more responsibly going forward. And I hope we're a part of a global push to do that. But thank you again, and thank you to everyone who was able to join us today. And next month, we're having a meetup about senior solo travel. And the following month, I'm not going to tell you very much about it because it's in the works, but it's going to be different from what we normally do. But I can pretty much guarantee you're really going to enjoy it. So that's all I'll say about that. But thank you everyone for joining us, and we'll see you back here in a month.
Thank you so much for having me.